Prince William uncovered something no one expected: proof that Queen Camilla was secretly influencing King Charles's royal decisions. Events were cancelled, Catherine was sidelined, and William had enough. What he exposed shook the palace to its core, leaving senior aides stunned, and the monarchy spinning toward crisis. William's discovery, the day everything changed. In late October 2025, Prince William's world shifted. What appeared at first to be minor interference within royal planning turned out to be something far more deliberate and far more dangerous. Two major engagements, both connected to Princess Catherine's highly anticipated return, were suddenly cancelled. These were not casual appearances. One was a National Children's Health Summit, where Catherine was scheduled to give her first speech post-treatment. A carefully crafted comeback moment supported by the king, her medical team, and key palace aides. Yet overnight, the event vanished from the calendar. William wasn't satisfied with the vague explanation of scheduling conflicts. He requested documentation, timeline memos, and internal approvals. What he found behind those closed palace doors left him stunned and furious. A direct paper trail led back to Queen Camilla's private office. Emails showed her senior staff quietly recommending cancellations, citing concerns about media optics, even though Catherine had been cleared to appear. Notes from private meetings between Camilla and King Charles referenced the events as potential distractions from broader royal narratives. It was no longer speculation. William had proof. He called an emergency meeting with his inner circle, demanding answers. "Why are my wife's engagements being pulled without consultation?" he asked. One senior aide hesitated before replying, "The direction came from higher up, from the Queen's team." That was the moment William realized the truth. His father, the king, wasn't operating independently. Camilla was not just the queen consort. She was actively shaping the monarchy's agenda, behind his back. According to sources inside Kensington Palace, William was devastated. He had long suspected subtle resistance to Catherine's popularity, but this was outright sabotage. The betrayal came not from critics, not from the press, but from within the very institution his family served. He reportedly told a senior advisor, "I let it go too long. I thought it was politics, but this is personal." From that moment, a line was drawn. William's trust in the palace structure cracked, and with it, his patience. This wasn't just about a cancelled appearance. It was about control, manipulation, and the quiet, calculated sidelining of the future queen. The secret power Camilla built behind the throne. Behind the polished public image of Queen Camilla was something the press never saw: a growing network of influence built within the palace walls. Insiders now say that since early 2024, Camilla had been carefully embedding her trusted former aides from Clarence House into key positions across the monarchy. From media liaisons to senior schedulers, her people weren't just present, they were steering decisions. She positioned herself as Charles's emotional anchor, managing his access and shaping the briefings he received each morning. According to one former staffer, nothing reached the king without going through Camilla's filter first. The changes were subtle. A reassigned meeting here, a cancelled appearance there. But over time, William's closest allies noticed a pattern. Projects tied to him or Catherine were delayed or deprioritized. Meanwhile, Camilla's personal initiatives were fast-tracked, fully funded, and widely promoted. One senior aide, previously involved in Queen Elizabeth's communications team, described it as a quiet power grab. There were no headlines, no declarations, just influence moving behind the scenes with ruthless efficiency. Palace sources say Camilla's influence even reached the Royal Communications Office, shifting how press briefings were written and who received favorable attention. Events involving Catherine were often buried under layers of bureaucratic delays, while Camilla's engagements dominated the rota. It wasn't just politics, it was strategy. Camilla feared being overshadowed, especially by Catherine's unshakable popularity and international appeal. So she did what few expected. She protected her position from behind the curtain. When William began asking questions, that system started to crack. A senior courtier who served both Charles and Queen Elizabeth put it plainly, she didn't take the throne with force. She took it with whispers. This was more than royal tension. It was a shadow reign, running parallel to Charles's leadership, and now it had been exposed. Sabotaging Catherine, a calculated move. The tipping point came not in whispers, but in a very public disappointment, the quiet sabotage of Princess Catherine's return to royal duty. After months of recovery and preparation, Catherine was set to headline a National Children's Health Summit in mid-October 2025. Her team had been working closely with palace staff, medical consultants, and even speechwriters to ensure the event would mark her graceful, powerful comeback. Every detail had been approved by King Charles himself. Then, without warning, the event was scrapped. At first, insiders claimed it was a joint scheduling issue or health-related concern, but these statements quickly began to unravel. William's office was blindsided. Catherine was confused. The event wasn't just postponed, it had been quietly erased. That's when leaked internal emails, dated October 16th, began circulating among palace staff. These messages showed that Queen Camilla's senior aides had directly intervened. One line from her press secretary read, "Recommend delay due to possible media comparison narratives. Suggest optics not ideal at this stage." The phrase media comparison was key. Sources now say Camilla feared Catherine's re-entry would steal public attention, especially during a time when Camilla's own approval ratings were slipping. Catherine's global appeal, her calm dignity, and her ability to capture public sympathy could easily eclipse Camilla. And she knew it. By halting Catherine's return under the guise of media strategy, Camilla bought herself time. But what she didn't anticipate was that William would notice everything. According to aides close to William, this wasn't the first time an engagement tied to Catherine had faced unexplained delays. Months earlier, a mental health campaign launch Catherine had planned was abruptly paused after senior adjustments. That incident had raised eyebrows. This one raised alarms. William, already on edge from recent revelations, saw this move for what it was, a targeted strike. His wife, the Princess of Wales, wasn't being sidelined by health or logistics. She was being intentionally muted. He reportedly told one staffer, "This isn't about planning anymore. This is personal, and it's deliberate." From that moment on, everything changed. William began making moves, contacting trusted aides directly rather than through the royal scheduling office, a sign that trust was unraveling inside the palace walls. Catherine, for her part, remained silent, graceful, focused. But behind that silence, she and William had started planning, not just for future appearances, but for a recalibration of power inside the monarchy. The sabotage attempt wasn't just a PR decision, it was a political maneuver, and it set off a chain of events that the palace was not prepared to contain. William confronts Charles, a heated private showdown. By October 26, 2025, Prince William had reached his limit. After watching his wife's engagements unravel, tracing the threads back to Camilla's influence, and confirming what insiders had feared for months, he took a step that would shake the palace to its core. He confronted the king. The meeting took place at Sandringham House, away from cameras, press, and the usual palace corridors. Only a few senior aides were aware of the meeting. It lasted over 2 hours. According to multiple palace sources, William came in composed but direct. He presented his findings, email trails, inconsistencies in scheduling, and documentation of decisions being made without proper protocol. Then, he asked the one question no one had dared pose before. Why are decisions changing after private weekends with Camilla? King Charles, reportedly caught off guard, attempted to deflect. He insisted he trusted the process and his staff, but when pressed further, he refused to directly name or acknowledge Camilla's role in recent changes. William didn't back down. One courtier familiar with the meeting said he told his father, "We cannot lead a modern monarchy with secrets and back channels. If we don't fix this now, it breaks everything later." But Charles remained firm, or perhaps trapped. Whether out of loyalty, emotional dependence, or fear of deeper fallout, the king declined to take immediate action. There was no apology, no admission, just silence. Days later, the world noticed a shift. William and Catherine withdrew from scheduled joint engagements with Charles and Camilla. A clear, calculated message. The Fab Four 2.0 image that the palace had been subtly building was abandoned. A public gap had formed between the future king and the current one, and the divide was growing. Behind the scenes, William began quietly reshuffling his own staff. Advisors suspected of being sympathetic to Camilla's network were moved. New roles were created. Private meetings were held late into the night at Kensington Palace. William was rebuilding his fortress, with Catherine at the center. And while Charles remained silent, insiders say he was shaken, not just by the confrontation, but by the growing distance between father and son. As one royal historian later remarked, this wasn't a rift over family. It was a rift over the future of the monarchy. And now the battle wasn't behind closed doors anymore. Palace aides revolt. The Restoration Circle emerges. What started as whispers in the palace corridors soon grew into a quiet rebellion. As William intensified his efforts to push back against Queen Camilla's growing influence, a group of veteran royal aides began taking notice and taking sides. They called themselves, privately, the Restoration Circle. Not out of arrogance, but out of loyalty to the late Queen Elizabeth II and to the foundational values of the monarchy that had kept it afloat for nearly a century. Many of these staffers had served Her Majesty for decades. They weren't interested in court drama or personal feuds, but what they saw unfolding under Camilla's quiet manipulation disturbed them. It wasn't just that Catherine's events were being pulled. It was the pattern, an internal imbalance of power that was threatening to compromise the crown itself. An internal audit was quietly initiated by a senior private secretary in early November. It revealed a startling trend. Within just 18 months, over 40% of senior palace roles had shifted toward individuals previously affiliated with Clarence House, Camilla's former household, before she became Queen Consort. These appointments weren't ceremonial. They were in positions of authority: communications, scheduling, press strategy, royal correspondence. In short, Camilla's network wasn't just present, it was running the palace machine. That's when the Restoration Circle took action. In a series of late-night meetings held inside St. James's Palace, senior aides, including at least 2 former Queen Elizabeth staffers, began drafting a confidential memorandum. The goal wasn't to attack Camilla directly, but to present King Charles with irrefutable evidence of constitutional imbalance. The memo included charts, timelines, and documented instances where palace decisions had been steered by consort influence rather than sovereign command. The final section of the document, dated November 12th, carried a chilling warning. We respectfully advise that without immediate course correction, the Crown risks internal collapse of trust, both within the institution and among the public it serves. The memo was ready, but presenting it? That was the dangerous part. King Charles, known for his emotional sensitivity and loyalty to Camilla, had made it clear he disliked confrontation, especially over family. But the Restoration Circle knew the risk of staying silent was greater. As one senior aide put it in a private message, "We served a monarchy, not a marriage. And if the institution falls, history won't ask who loved who. It'll ask who let it happen." The palace was no longer united. It was splitting, one side protecting legacy, the other protecting power. And the pressure was only beginning to mount. The Diana parallel. History repeats in the worst way. As the Camilla revelations surfaced and tensions escalated inside the palace, something haunting began to stir: the ghost of Princess Diana. What shocked insiders the most wasn't just Camilla's manipulation. It was how eerily familiar it all felt. The control, the gatekeeping, the emotional silencing of a royal woman. Palace aides began whispering the unthinkable. "We've seen this before." In 1995, Diana sat down for her now iconic Panorama interview, speaking about the pressures of palace life, and famously declaring, "There were 3 of us in this marriage." But there was another quote, one less discussed, that resurfaced in royal circles. "There's a lot going on behind the scenes. Decisions are being made for people, not by them." Now, 3 decades later, her son was living through a similar storm, only this time, he was the one trying to stop it. William reportedly told a close aide, "I feel like I'm watching history repeat itself, but now I know how it ends." The parallels were impossible to ignore. A beloved royal woman, Catherine, quietly pushed aside. Decisions overridden. Events cancelled. And behind it all, a woman once considered an outsider now steering the ship from the shadows. Social media ignited almost instantly. Clips of Diana's old interviews went viral. Comparisons were drawn, not just by fans, but by royal commentators and journalists. Hashtags like #DianaWarnedIts and #Camilla overstepped flooded platforms. Old photos of Diana with a young William were paired with new headlines about Catherine being blocked. The visual message clear: the past is not finished with the monarchy. Some palace aides described the atmosphere inside as haunted. Not literally, but emotionally, as if the institution was being forced to reckon with the wounds it never properly healed. Even Queen Elizabeth had once said privately that Diana's memory would never be far from the future. Now, her words felt prophetic. But this time, Diana's legacy wasn't just being remembered. It was being weaponized by a public demanding accountability and by a son who refused to let his mother's mistakes be repeated. For William, this wasn't just a fight for Catherine. It was a deeply personal reckoning. As one royal correspondent put it, William isn't just the heir now. He's the avenger of a history his mother never got to escape. The monarchy was once again at the edge of the same storm that nearly broke it in the 90s. And this time, the world was watching with both eyes open. Public turns against Camilla. The approval collapse. It had only took 48 hours. Once the leaks about Camilla's interference became public, from blocked events to internal manipulation, the public reaction was instant and brutal. Queen Camilla's approval ratings, hovering modestly in the 50s, plummeted by 26%, according to the YouGov Royal Tracker. The British public, especially younger generations, didn't see a loving consort anymore. They saw a palace operator using back channels to silence the woman they adored, Princess Catherine. Mainstream outlets jumped on the story. BBC, Sky News, and even the traditionally conservative Daily Mail ran back-to-back coverage. Royal commentators discussed not just the facts of the scandal, but the optics. One headline read, "Queen or Queenmaker? Is Camilla pulling Charles's strings?" The press no longer treated her with caution. The gloves were off. Outside Buckingham Palace and Parliament Square, protesters began gathering with signs that hadn't been seen in years. "Not my queen. Catherine deserves better." History is repeating itself. On social media, things escalated even faster. Hashtags like #CamillaExposed, #PeopleStandWithKate, and #WilliamTakeTheThrone were trending globally. Thousands of users shared side-by-side photos of Diana and Catherine, calling them the real heart of the monarchy. Even pro-royal influencers began shifting tone. Instead of defending the institution, they started defending individuals, namely William and Catherine. Demographics showed the deepest dip came from the 18 to 34 age group, a segment the royal family desperately needs to retain for survival. And now, they were turning away from Camilla with disgust. Camilla's team scrambled into damage control mode. A rushed statement was released, calling recent reports misunderstandings and praising Catherine for her strength and grace. But it backfired. The public saw it for what it was, a scripted, hollow attempt to smooth over deep cracks. One PR expert told ITV, "This isn't just a bad week for Camilla. It's the undoing of years of brand building in one news cycle." Meanwhile, Catherine, quiet, graceful, and unshaken, became even more admired. And as Camilla's image collapsed, a new queen-in-waiting rose from the wreckage. Catherine's quiet power, a silent response that spoke volumes. While the media roared and Camilla's office spiraled, Princess Catherine remained silent. And yet, her silence was louder than any press release or public statement. Just 3 days after the leak, Catherine made a surprise private visit to a children's hospice in Hampshire. No official announcement, no photographers, no media invite. Just her, the children, and a small staff. The photos, quietly released by the hospice itself, showed Catherine sitting on the floor, painting with the kids, smiling softly. The simplicity was striking. In a time of scandal, her authenticity stood out like a lighthouse in a storm. Palace aides say Catherine deliberately avoided public comment, not because she was weak, but because she understood the power of presence over noise. Where Camilla's team tried to spin narratives, Catherine allowed truth to reveal itself naturally. Her approval rating surged to 78%, rivaling the highs once held by Princess Diana. But it wasn't just the numbers, it was what people were saying. Online forums called her the people's queen in waiting. Mothers praised her warmth. Young women called her an example of quiet resilience. Even skeptical Republicans admitted she carried herself with undeniable dignity. Behind the scenes, however, Catherine wasn't idle. She and William were said to be holding late-night strategy meetings at Kensington Palace with a core circle of trusted advisors. Discussions ranged from upcoming engagements to long-term succession planning. Catherine wasn't just riding out the storm, she was preparing for what comes next. One aide close to the princess said, "She's not fighting for power. She's protecting the future of the monarchy." There's a difference, and the public sees it. Even amid personal attack, even with events stripped from her hands, Catherine refused to stoop to palace games. And that made her more powerful than ever. As Camilla's shadow reign fractured, Catherine's quiet rise became impossible to ignore. The monarchy, it seemed, wasn't just facing a crisis. It was witnessing a shift in who the people believe should lead it next. Charles under pressure. His leadership questioned. King Charles is facing the most critical test of his reign, and it's coming from inside his own palace. After Prince William uncovered Queen Camilla's behind-the-scenes influence, pressure mounted from every direction: royal insiders, the public, and even political circles. On November 27, 2025, Charles held a private meeting with constitutional advisors at Clarence House, reportedly to explore the legal limits of Camilla's role. What was once a symbolic partnership is now seen as a parallel power structure, one that may be undermining the king's authority. Senior MPs are now informally discussing legislation to redefine the powers of the queen consort, something unprecedented in modern monarchy. Inside the palace, aides are split. Some call the king paralyzed by emotion. Others say he simply doesn't know how to stop the damage without shattering everything. Meanwhile, the public sees silence and weakness. The once stable image of Charles and Camilla is cracking, and every day the king avoids action. His leadership loses credibility. As one royal analyst said, "If Charles can't control his own court, how can he lead a country?" Now, he faces an impossible choice: protect the monarchy or protect Camilla. A monarchy in crisis. What happens now? This is no longer palace gossip. It's a full-scale royal breakdown unfolding in real time, and the world is watching. Prince William's discovery of Camilla's behind-the-scenes manipulation has triggered a reckoning. What began as quiet concern over cancelled events has now shaken the monarchy's image, dividing public opinion and exposing deep cracks in leadership. William, once the dutiful heir, has become the voice of reason, defending Princess Catherine, calling for accountability, and carrying the legacy of Princess Diana forward with unwavering resolve. His actions have reignited public loyalty. But Camilla, she's now the monarchy's most controversial figure. Accused of influencing decisions and undermining royal unity, her silence speaks volumes, and not in her favor. Inside the palace, aides are scrambling. A reform task force may be in the works, but it could be too little, too late. The monarchy is standing on a knife's edge. Can Charles restore control? Will Camilla step back? And if they don't, will the public still believe in the crown? As one historian warned, after Diana, the monarchy had time. Now, it may not. The next move will define everything, and this time, silence may cost the throne. With Camilla's quiet grip exposed and public trust crumbling, the crown faces a moment of truth. William stood up, but will Charles follow through? The monarchy's future now hinges on one question. Can power be reclaimed from within? Or has the palace already fallen to a queen who won't back down?